Hello world, this is your host Gulmikhi Saleh, the author of Princess Diversity and the Golden Rule. Speak Up with Gulmikhi is a talk show that focuses on a holistic approach to tackle hate by promoting understanding and goodness. We want to empower our audience to break the cycle of hate by creating an environment where there is understanding and empathy amongst all people through the universal message of the Golden Rule, which is to treat others as one would treat oneself. So every week I have a special guest who speaks on promoting goodness in an individual and society. So today our guest speaker is Martina Hussein, who is a special education teacher and case manager. She will discuss what does tolerance look like, how can we teach tolerance, why is it so important, and how teaching tolerance is a major key to ending bullying. She'll also speak about self-advocacy and the importance of promoting acceptance. And so we have her here now live. So Martina Hussein is a goal-driven professional educator with a solid commitment to social and academic growth and development for every student, regardless of their disability. A self-directed, action-oriented professional with over 20 years working in education and community service. She has piloted students and parent workshops addressing building self-esteem and self-efficacy, culture diversity, tolerance, acceptance, developing a growth mindset, and post-secondary transmission planning. As a child, she had to also deal with dyslexia, and now she's a strong believer in self-advocacy and demonstrating growth through individual strengths and weakness, and understanding is very crucial to children's development. So now tell us more, something else besides your academic and your professional life. Tell us more about yourself.
Okay, so I am a mother, and I am, before I actually went into education, I worked with adults with intellectual disabilities and autism, and absolutely loved it. And it is a difficult field to work in, but it's also part of what drove me to special education, seeing adults that should have learned skills and weren't taught those skills early on was something that really promoted me and moved me towards special education. But I try to do a lot of walks, like interfaith. I like to be involved in anything interfaith. That also, that goes hand in hand with tolerance. So learning about our neighbors and really reaching out to them is a good thing. So I try to do that, anything to save the earth, earth walks, things like that. So I'm a typical mom. I've got boys in sports. I have a young daughter. So we're just running around doing all kinds of things. I am currently going to school for my doctorate, so I am insanely busy. But it's going to be worth it, I think, in the end.
Yeah, I hope you success. I know how hardworking you are, and you're amazing. I see you as a teacher too. You do such a great, you put a lot of effort into your teaching, and you make sure that your students are well taught to their ability. So, I've seen her work. It's amazing how she does that. I have several pages up, so let me just go to the back to my questions. So
okay.
How long have you been working with children, and what motivated you to work with children?
Okay, so wow. So I guess, wow, I'm going to age myself at about 23 years. So I've been a special education teacher and case manager for about almost 7 years. But before that, I was saying, I used to work with people with intellectual disabilities and autism and special needs. So I was always kind of drawn to individuals with disabilities, and I used to volunteer at the school to do after school programming and things like that for these very specific students, especially with reading and things like that. So forever.
When you're passionate about something, it's like, you don't think about even stopping. You don't imagine
Right.
you're going to retire ever. So you always want to keep doing this good you're doing. And of
Mm-hmm.
course, you mentioned to me that you had some issues as a child, a learning
Mm-hmm.
disability. Maybe was that one of the reason also that
Oh,
motivated you?
absolutely. So I guess you could say that I was one of the children that I say is affected by intolerance. And so children who have special needs are often bullied, as you know, um, singled out, and just taunted, bullied, given a hard time. And that is a form of intolerance. So that's like going back to our main focus. But yeah, so I, as a person with dyslexia, I struggle. So I struggled with reading from a very early age. It doesn't mean that, when you struggle with things, it doesn't mean that you're not intelligent. And that's the one thing that I really hope. And if there's any kids listening, I hope you really get that we all have strengths and we all have weaknesses, every one of us. And your strength may be math, and my strength may be art, or my strength may be writing, and your strength may be, we're all different. So it doesn't mean that we're any less intelligent than the other person. It just means that we learn differently, we think differently, we process information differently. But yeah, because of that. So it wasn't until I was in second grade and I was actually held back. So for anyone who doesn't understand that phrase, it basically means you're in second grade or whatever grade that you're in, and you're not academically where you should be. So they don't do it as much anymore since No Child Left Behind came into focus with the government. But years ago, it was common practice, and sometimes they still do, hold students back. So what they will say is they'll have a conference with your parent and say, we don't think Martina should go on to third grade because she can't read. She's not where she should be, and one more year would do her good. So that's like the common thing that they tend to say. And sometimes that, maybe it wasn't a bad thing that I spent an extra year in second grade, but that's really when the taunting and the bullying and stuff really happened. And so for me, I always want to try to communicate to kids that if you find yourself in that situation, it is okay.
Mm-hmm.
Like failure, we don't really fail. I really don't like the word failure. Like failure is just a way. And now that this is a famous saying by someone else and not me, but failure is really just an opportunity to start over more intelligently. So if you try something and it doesn't work, or you're really working towards something and you feel like it's not really working out for you for whatever reason, it doesn't mean you failed. It just means you need to look at it from a different view and try again, and maybe go back and reassess how to do that. So yeah, so that's a mouthful.
Yes. I mean, I could also state that me myself, being bilingual, being raised in a different society, I always believe maybe I did have a learning disability, but it was never tested. Like I know I'm a slow learner, and I
Mm-hmm.
was observed. I learned differently, and spelling. I had a big issue with spelling even till this day. Spelling is an issue, language
Mm-hmm.
is an issue.
Mm-hmm.
Really pushing myself, as you see. This is proof of it, me coming live on Facebook and talking. So I went through a lot, but I know if people notice it, teachers notice that I had some difficulty, that they will help me in different ways instead of making me repeat ESL class for almost all my elementary school time.
Mm-hmm.
I was in ESL and I had to repeat second grade and I had to repeat third grade. Yeah, it's
Yeah.
out.
Right.
Out live now. Everyone knows.
Yeah, so that was really common practice back then. Now they look more at interventions and accommodations that we can make to help students to kind of bridge that gap. So if you're here and you need to be here, how can we get you here? So we look at education differently now than we did, 15, 20 years ago. Yeah. So yeah, me too. So yeah. So I see that that happening a lot. So actually what you're describing, and I'm not saying you're dyslexic, but actually what you're describing are signs and symptoms of dyslexia. Also, I mean, there's a lot of them actually. So you may have been an undiagnosed dyslexic, and what happens is there are 1 in 5 people have some form of communication issue, and dyslexia falling into that, and people just aren't aware. And so what we think is that a student is slow. They'll say, well, they're slow, or they're just like, they struggle. They want to put this like definition. So a lot of times people will say, well, they're developmentally delayed, because they don't really know what the problem is or the issue is. Why aren't you, really grasping this? Why aren't you getting that? But there are, so again, like you kind of fit some of those. So for me, I also have organizational issues. So I know that about myself. If I don't write it down, I won't do it. If I don't write it down, I won't remember to do it. I will forget. I really will. So if I tell you I'm going to call you and I don't put a message in my phone or an alarm or put it on my calendar, it's not going to happen. So those are called executive functioning issues. And a lot of people with disabilities, dyslexia, and other language issues, they have those issues. And so I do myself, I have those issues. So I think that's why it's really important for me as an adult. And it comes from my mom. It stems from my mom and her pushing me constantly and saying, she really took no excuse. There was no excuse. It doesn't matter. You can do it. You will do it. We're going to do it. Sit down. We're going to do it. Do it. So that was just her attitude. And I'm really grateful for that because she really changed my perspective about myself. Now, that's not to say that I don't still doubt myself. So there are times I'm really, really trying and working on this to get out of that. But as a human being, there are times when I'm in a room with other people who I know are intelligent, smart. They seem to have their stuff together. And, here I am struggling to keep my things organized. I will self-doubt sometimes, not thinking that I'm not intelligent, but I always think that maybe I'm not just quite as intelligent as they are. And kids fall into that a lot, I think.
Yeah.
So just knowing that for myself, that's why I was saying what I said before. So
yeah. So continuing on with the questions, can you explain how intolerance look like?
So what does intolerance look like? Okay, so I think in order for us to really fully understand what is intolerance, we have to kind of understand what is tolerance. So we think we know what tolerance is, but honestly, really understanding what it means to be tolerant of others is important, because whether we want to admit it or not, everyone has bias. We have bias. So you may see a young man with purple spiky hair and big things in his ears, and you might think to yourself, oh my God, like maybe you don't, but some people do. And we all have those kind of bias. Maybe you see someone wearing like really bright clothes, they're very eccentric. Someone who, there was a person in my neighborhood when I was a kid who wore a hat that she sewed like tons of buttons on, but all different colored buttons. Everybody called her the crazy hat lady. So, I mean, we have those biases in us, whether we want to admit it or not. So we all have that potential to be somewhat intolerant. And I think recognizing that and understanding that is the first key to tolerance. So intolerance, tolerance, first of all, is it's respect, acceptance, and appreciation for the rich diversity that is in our world around us. So it's tolerance in harmony with difference. So it means to just be able to live harmoniously with others, regardless of their differences, whatever their differences may be. So we don't have to necessarily agree with whatever it is, but we have to be accepting of their differences. So intolerance. So specifically because we've been talking about schools and children and bullying. Intolerance, experts say that intolerance is a language. Yeah, so I never would have thought of as intolerance as being defined as a language, but it is because it communicates. Yeah. So intolerance is communicated. Whether you realize you're communicating it or not, we are. So tolerance is viewed as thinking and feeling, and more importantly, acting upon thinking, what we think and what we feel. So tolerance can give us peace as an individual. It makes you feel, at peace with yourself. Like if you have tolerance for others and you feel that they accept you, respect for those who are not like us, and also a wisdom to discern in humane values. So thinking about another person in a humane way. Mm-hmm. So when we go into the schools, and you think about schools specifically, or institutions of higher learning even, and in the last 3 years, unfortunately, in society as a whole, it can look in many different ways. So some people have started to voice their intolerance and feel that it is their right to do so. So they may wear T-shirts that say have hateful rhetoric or racist comments. They may actually make a comment towards you as you walk towards them. It's really quite upsetting at times. And so if you think as an adult, if you've ever had it happen to you and you know how that feels, to feel as if someone is judging you for whatever reason that is, and you can feel that, just imagine how that feels for a child who doesn't have the emotional awareness and maturity that we do. So in schools, it looks a lot like bullying, and actually it kind of goes hand in hand with bullying. A lot of time intolerance actually is shown through bullying. So it could be students verbal altercations, making comments about a child within their range to be able to hear that statement. It could be being left out of an activity. So recently in a program that I work in, there was a young man, he came to me and he said, I wasn't allowed to play because I'm different. And I said, well, how do you know that you weren't allowed to play because you're different? And he said, well, because when they were picking the people for the teams, he said the young man's name, and he said, I don't want that retard on my team. So this young man has a physical disability, very obvious physical disability. His cognitive ability is not affected, but even if it was, he has the mindset to understand what that word means. So unfortunately, hate that word. But that is a form of intolerance. So making that kind of comment, yes, it's bullying, but it's also saying that you're different from me, and I see that you're different from me, and because of that, I don't want you anywhere near me. So so it can look like that. It can also look like whispers, fingers pointing, those kind of things. So you just feel like as a child that someone else is speaking about you or talking about you, or you come into a room and everyone's laughing and then all of a sudden they're not speaking anymore. So that will make you feel as if, me being here, they must have been talking about me, or maybe they weren't, but it comes across that way. So intolerance can actually be seen in many ways, but again, it is considered a form of language because it's communicated. It can be as simple as wearing a T-shirt that says it's open season on Muslims. I actually saw that T-shirt. Lovely. Or it could be as, it can literally be wearing a piece of clothing that has hateful rhetoric on it. It could be making verbal altercations, like making comments to someone based on their race, their ethnicity, their religious beliefs, their cognitive ability, physical ability, mental illness. So any of those things can be a reason for someone to make, intolerant type conversations or comments.
Wow. So those who are watching, thank you for sharing that. That was very helpful. So those who are watching, if you're really enjoying it, please do share with other people so they could also benefit from Martina Hussein, who is a teacher. She's a special education teacher, and she's a case manager. So please share it so others could benefit. I know some people are asking questions. Usually what we do is we have the introduction, the Q&A between me and the guests, and then afterwards we answer the questions of those who are watching. So let's go on to the next question. Why is it important for parents and teachers to teach their children about tolerance?
So there's a lot of different reasons. Obviously, we want our kids to live in peace and harmony, and in a perfect utopian society, that's what we would have, but unfortunately we don't. So because of that, I think it's important for us to be able to teach kids that living in a diverse community and in a diverse environment is educational. It teaches them that we are all the same. Even though we are different, we're still the same. So there's so many more similarities than there are differences. And I think it's really important for kids to have that. But it's important because our communities, our workplaces, schools are increasingly becoming more and more culturally, racially, and even ethnical groups are just expanding. So you're going to be working with, whether you like it or not, you're going to be working with someone who's different than yourself. So I think it's really important that we try to understand, where they're coming from and understand different people's perspectives. And that will help you to build kind of a picture of, different perspectives of the world in which we live. We all come from different places. We've had different experiences, and all those experiences and differences are very valuable. So this helps us to dispel negative stereotypes. So a lot of times kids will hear comments about racial comments about people who are of a different race, and they think that that is true. So whatever it is they're hearing, if they're not exposed to people from that culture, from that race, or from that specific lifestyle, then whatever it is they're hearing, and sometimes it's the parents that teach this, which is kind of hard thing to address when parents teach hate or parents teach intolerance. But it really builds up those biases that we have. And like I said, we all kind of have those personal biases, whether we want to admit it or not. When you see someone who's a little different than you might think, but it's really knowing that about ourselves and trying to embrace that and to push through that and be more accepting of people. But yeah, negative stereotypes and personal biases are developed from a young age. And so if the more you expose your child from a young age to people who are of different backgrounds and from different areas, the more culture you're giving your child, and the more intelligence and the ability to think in a different manner and outside. It's kind of outside of your own box type of thinking.
Yeah, very well said. I agree with you. Even adults, like you said, parents, teachers, administrators, a lot of people have these bias, and sometimes it comes out. And
absolutely.
Like what I did with myself is I went through these sessions purifying the heart. So see if I have envy, hatred, jealousy, or anything towards. So every episode was for a different aspects, a different bad character that you don't want to have. So I would look into myself. So every time I would say something to someone, or do something against someone, I would ask myself, why did I do it? So this was between me and myself. There was no one around me, so I didn't have to feel embarrassed. So sometimes I was disgusted, what I found out. So and I start, working on that issue I had with myself. And
Right.
it's like something they call unschooling, but this is now, you're taking all that bias you were raised with, whether it was through the TV, through school, through your home. So it's a great way to purify. That's one thing we don't have. We don't have time to sit and reflect and contemplate over why we said things and why we did certain issues, acted in a certain way. And another thing we don't do is we don't research. Is it true? Is what this person said true? Did this person really did do that? We just believe. We hear and we believe, and we accept that as truth.
That's very well said. Very well said. Yeah, my mother used to say that, like you were saying, we don't research it to see if it's true, that a lie will go much further than the truth. And even if you're the victim of a lie and you're able to come back and say, no, that's not true, and here's why it's not true, and here's the evidence, there will still be people who will believe the lie, even though you've shown them, the truth. So yeah, absolutely. And that self-reflection, especially about our own biases, are the only way that in which we can actually change ourselves and develop and grow and grow our own tolerance towards others as well.
Yeah. One of the person I was working with, we're trying to help each other, with our projects. So he was asking me that, I see these other pages, they have so many comments, so many likes, so many things. I said, what are they doing? Are they promoting goodness like you and I are? Oh, well, I said people want to, even in the media, in the news, you just, what gets attention? When someone's saying bad, wrong, that gets attention. And if people are promoting goodness, people that won't get that much attention as long as a person really wants to hear that. Even in all the holy books of the Christians, the Jews, and the Muslims, like all the prophets that came, they always came to promote goodness, but they got the least attention. But those had,
of course.
Yeah. So let's continue. Those who are watching, please share. Today we have Martina Hussein, who is speaking about tolerance and teaching it, why it's important. So if you're really enjoying it, I know I see questions. Please hold off. I will go through the list and see what questions came first, and we'll answer at the end of the discussion. So what are some of the lasting effects on a child who learns to have tolerance for others?
Okay. So lasting effects of teaching tolerance to children, or actually just teaching tolerance to anyone, is simply put, it's humanity. It's humanity. So when you teach kids and kids develop the ability to see others through a human lens, and they can see value in others, they see value in people who are different than themselves, that is more valuable than any other thing that you could possibly gain from it. So they're going to be more naturally understanding of others. They're going to be sympathetic to the issues that are happening globally around the world. They have a more understanding of global awareness. They're more willing to interact with cultures that are different from themselves. So kind of like what I was saying earlier, when we start with our children and they're interacting with other cultures from a really early age, it really smashes the barriers. It really breaks down those barriers of fear and ignorance. And it teaches us that our hearts are the same. We are all human, and we're all worthy of acceptance, and we're all worthy of understanding. So that, I think that is the biggest value you could possibly get, is just simple humanity and being more understanding and more globally aware of issues that are in the world. So like your issue, or like your, promoting goodness. So that comes from humanity. And probably the biggest value that we could teach any child.
Very, that's very well said. You know, I was thinking as you were speaking, I look at my childhood and I see that, you know, I don't really recall my father. He passed away when I was very young, around 12 years old, when I was 12. He didn't really like tell me, you know, do this or do that, this is wrong or this is right against people, but his actions spoke to me louder than anything. He was,
Right.
you know, he was always a peace activist. He was always marching for peace. He invited, our house was like open doors to everyone. We had African Americans come, we had Hispanic come, we had people of all faith, we had Caucasian, all people of all faith, we had Christians coming, Jews coming to our house. So you know, those memories stuck with me, you know, and I think that's where it came from, you know. And then when, so my mother, she was always telling me, be nice, be kind, respect the elders. She always would teach me that. But I see through her example is she was always caring for the neighbors. She always cared about the community. She was always helping in her way to help those in need. You know, someone was sick, she was always there for them. If they were moving, she would always cook them something. You know, she was a great host. So she always would, her action, like I said, both of my parents spoke, you know, it like ingrained something in my heart that, you know, when I saw them doing that, it really affected me. Even though we had some of these people that would come in, they would have some hateful remarks towards other faiths or other race and stuff. And I, as a child, I would not like it. You know, it just didn't resonate with me because what I saw my parents. So.
Yeah, I agree completely. So I think that that's really important, that part of teaching tolerance is being tolerant. Like we can't tell our children that this is how you have to be and this is what you need to do and this is how you need to act, and then we display different behavior. Like for ages that happens. Like I can remember my father used to smoke when he passed away when I was young, but he used to smoke, and he used to tell us, and especially like my older sister, because she was older than me, don't smoke. Like, don't do it. We don't smoke. Don't smoke. But he smoked. So it was kind of giving that, you know, a different message. And our kids, whether, like I said, we have biases of our own, and we really, we want to grow from that and try to change that. But our kids can see that as well. So hopefully they'll feel comfortable enough to say, hey, you know, did you realize that when you said this, that was maybe in, you know, or what's a nice way to put it, you know, but for kids to just be able to say to you that, you know, that was intolerance and that's not okay and you shouldn't speak that way about other people, or did you know that you feel that way? And then maybe you would stop to think and say, oh, you know, maybe I do. Maybe I need to think about that a little bit. But I think that by simply meeting people who are unlike ourselves, we become more empathetic to their challenges, and we're more likely to support them for their fights for justice. So whatever their fight might be, you're going to be more empathetic towards a person if you know them from a personal level, and you can understand that we do have similarities, and that even though we have differences, we do have more similarities. And I think also that diversity sparks creativity, and that's in the education setting for children as well as for adults in the workplace. So the more diversity we have, and the more you're willing to listen and interact with people who are different from yourselves, the more you can learn. It pushes us towards an innovation, and it helps us to think outside of our own little box. So sometimes you think, oh, well, this is what we should do. And then someone comes and they have a totally different idea that you never would have even thought of. And if you sit back and think about it, maybe it's not 100% perfect, or it might not be exactly the way you want to go at that time, but there might be a piece of it that you wouldn't have thought of that is genius, or just really like, wow, where did that come from? So I think, yeah, just being tolerant is for everyone, children and adults.
Yeah, you said it very beautifully. So how can we support tolerance and acceptance?
I'm sorry?
how can we support tolerance and acceptance?
Okay. So one of the things I was just saying kind of fit into that one as well. So I think to increase your level of understanding about other cultures, that's the first thing. And the way to do that is to interact with people who are outside of your own culture. Interact with others and create meaningful relationships that might not develop otherwise. So if you're not willing to put yourself out there and speak to someone who might be different than you, then you're not really going to be able to promote tolerance. So promoting tolerance and that can be in the workplace or just anywhere, actually. Sometimes, like if you're going into Wawa, you might see someone who, like, they have this scowl on their face, and I've seen this before many times. Sometimes we want to jump to our own personal bias and think, oh, they have some kind of bias against me, like this person doesn't like me for whatever reason. And maybe that's true, and maybe they're just really having a bad day.
Sure.
So we kind of we jump to conclusions sometimes. So put yourself out there. Maybe they really are biased. Maybe they've never spoken to anyone who's like you before. Maybe they have these ideas, like you said, that were taught from parents that are just wrong. So good morning. Hi, how are you? Sometimes that can go a long way. Sometimes just you starting a conversation with someone, it might feel a little awkward or uncomfortable at first, but it can really go a long way to supporting tolerance and actually changing people's minds about their preconceived notions about what it means to be whatever it is that they think that you are. So that's the first thing. I would say avoid imposing your values on others.
Well, yeah.
So your values are your values, and my values are my values, and we all have values, but they're inconsistent and will conflict with other cultures other than our own. So it's really important that you embrace your own values and that you have values, because if you didn't, wow. But it's also equally as important not to say, so I don't drink. So because I don't drink, I think it's wrong and no one should drink. So that might be how I feel, but is it appropriate for me to say so? Especially if a person feels like, oh, it's okay, one or every once in a while, kind of thing. So I'm not promoting drinking, so please don't think that. But what I'm trying to say is, it's not okay for me to impose my own personal values on someone else based on my beliefs. So I would say just be really careful to try not to do that. When interacting with someone who does not speak proficient English. So I've actually seen this before. People tend to speak slower and louder. That doesn't help. So I just want to say, just be really careful for anyone who's listening, who may not even think they're doing it, but it happens. If someone doesn't speak English, remember English is their second language, and it by no means is a reflection of their level of intelligence at all. So just because they're learning a new language, that's amazing in itself, doesn't mean that they're not intelligent. So I just say be really careful with interacting with people whose language is not the same as yours, and that could go either way. So when I'm in Egypt, my Arabic is not strong, and I hope someday that it will be. And I hope that people don't think that I'm not intelligent because I can't speak proficient. So I think it really doesn't matter what the language is. So if they can't speak your language, it's not a reflection that they're not intelligent. Okay, so then I would say recognize and understand that the concepts within the helping profession, like in the family, so gender roles and spirituality and emotional well-being, and specifically among specific cultures. So we play different roles in different cultures. So if you go to one country or look at a certain culture, the woman may play the most important role, or kind of a matriarchic type of, she's really the one who's in charge in all reality. And in other cultures, it's the man. So just be aware of that. So try not to make assumptions about people's, you know, their places in their homes and their places within the family structure. Because it's different from culture to culture. So I would say like that's really important, especially like in business meetings, when you're reaching out, like interfaith meetings that we do. When you do the interfaith meetings, like you will find out that we have a lot of similarities, but there are some things that are really different and will surprise you.
Yeah.
And that would be one. And then I would say when you're in the workplace or an educational setting or clinical setting, even advocate for use of materials that is culturally diverse. Mm-hmm. So if you're opening a clinic or you work in the mental health field, you know, and you're going to put pamphlets out that are about a specific thing, maybe bipolar or some type of pamphlet, educational leaflet that you want to put out, you know, try to keep it diverse. Like you can't cover everyone, you can't cover everything, but a little diversity goes a long way. And then also that kind of helps with the biases that we create ourselves as well. Mm-hmm. And then for me, the most important part is intervening. Mm-hmm. If you see, and it is so hard sometimes, if you see someone being disrespectful, being blatantly racist, or just spewing all kinds of hateful rhetoric, speak up. Sometimes it can be frightening. It can. Like it's not always easy. But I think when we observe others engaging in behaviors of cultural insensitivity, bias, or prejudice, we have to be a voice that says, you know what, that's not okay. Because by doing that, we also empower others to do the same thing. So if maybe someone else is sitting there too, and they're thinking somebody should really say something, but maybe they're afraid too. If you stand up and you say, you know, what you just said is not right, or the action that you just took is wrong because this or that, then you've empowered someone else to possibly also speak up and say, she's right, or what you did is wrong because of this. You know, and maybe, like I was saying earlier, we all have those biases that we don't think that we have, but we actually do have. And maybe they didn't even realize what they were saying was offensive, or that they were making a judgment that was in fact intolerant or biased. And that's like, for me, that's the big one, is just, you know, advocate for others. If you see someone in a situation, and that can be bullying in the school system, like if you see a child being bullied and you're another child, you want to teach it. So if there's any kids here listening, I know sometimes you have kids on that tune into your show. You know, if you see something, you know, if you don't feel safe saying something yourself, find an adult who will. Yeah. Find an adult who will, because it's not okay. And the only way to stop it is to speak up and say this, it's not okay. Mm-hmm. So that's the first step. It's not okay. This is not okay. Mm-hmm. So I don't want to be on a soapbox, but.
That's true. A lot of us are not speaking up, and we need to do more of that. So continuing on, those who are watching, we have Martina Hussein, who's talking about tolerance. And if you're really enjoying it, share with others. So continuing on with the questions, we don't have that much time, so I'm going to try to combine them if I could. How practicing acceptance and embracing difference can enrich our lives. And I'll say the next question too, so if you want to come back. How can difference enhance our understanding of the world?
Okay. So I think the first one we kind of already touched on, based on the fact that, you know, when we engage with people who are different from ourselves, it opens up our minds, and it really fuels creativity. It makes us think outside of our own boxes, and it kind of, you know, it engages us and makes us think maybe differently. It also gives us more of a world perspective, and there's that humanity piece where you build that humanity, and you can see others as you see yourself, as valuable, and you can see them as a person who deserves value, regardless of race, religion, whatever it is, ethnicity, personal beliefs, whatever that is. If you develop tolerance and you develop acceptance, then you are in fact saying that you value another person's life. So that's what I would say on the first one, because we really already went over that. And then I'm sorry, what was the second part?
How can difference enhance our understanding of the world?
Okay. So whenever you reach out to other people and you see people with different cultures, different backgrounds, you get different perspectives on what's happening and what's going on. And that includes a global perspective. So I remember when I was younger, a lot of people watch the news. And so if you watch the news, you only see it from one side. And I remember the first time I traveled abroad, there was a person who had some really negative, oh, she's American, like had really negative opinions about me, and felt that I must be, this trashy, slutty, white American female. And how could you bring her here, kind of a thing. And so then when I actually, I was there for a few days and I was watching television, and I realized that the only American programs that they had was Cheaters. And so it was Cheaters, Desperate Housewives,
wow,
and Jerry Springer. And I was like, wow, if I only watched Jerry Springer, Desperate Housewives, and Cheaters, I might think that all American women are trash too. So I had to, it really took me a while to really learn that our biases and perceptions are actually, developed through many lenses, and television and media being one of them. So I hope I answered the question.
That's an excellent way to look at it. I having empathy. So, these people who are, saying Muslims are terrorists or we're barbarian and all this. So I have this empathy. I put myself in their shoes and I think of myself as them, and I see that in the news, their fellow Americans being killed, bombed, and this and that. Then I said, I would be afraid of Muslims too, right? So
right.
This is one of the reasons I'm trying to promote goodness and understanding. So people have this understanding that no, not all Muslims are terrorists, not all African Americans are criminals, not all Hispanics are gang members, not all Caucasians are, here to, take over the world. So, I'm trying to promote this goodness for everyone, regardless of our faith, our nationality, and like you said, we need to get out of that box and come out to the world and see more of it and have a better understanding. So continuing on, you speak about self advocacy. So what is it and why is it important?
Okay, so self-advocacy, really shortly, is just exactly what it says. So to advocate means to speak for yourself or for others. So we can be advocates for our children or for our students or for other people involved in our lives. And a lot of times we forget to advocate for ourselves. So self-advocacy is when you can stand up and say, this is who I am and this is what I need. And that's okay. Because we are all different. So when it comes to bullying, since we were talking about bullying and tolerance, self-advocacy for kids, we really need to teach them that if they feel uncomfortable, if they see something or they're treated in a way that makes them uncomfortable, we need to help them to develop someone in that school, or even you, if they're not comfortable with anyone at the school, that they can speak to and say, this is what happened and this is how it made me feel. And it's really, really important if we can get someone in the school that child is comfortable with, because someone from the school has a different perspective than a parent. Because if a child comes to me and says, this is what happened and this is how it made me feel, and it's my child, and this actually happened with my child. She was bullied horribly in the last school that she was in. And I'm so happy now that she's in a beautiful school, wonderful school, where she's supported and she feels safe. But it actually did happen. And it made me feel like I had little or no control over the situation, because I kept reporting it. I kept going in. And so, there are times when we can do everything right and it just doesn't seem to make a difference. But there's a lot of research out there, and one of your talks that you do is strictly on how to prevent bullying and what to do if you're bullied, which I absolutely love that. But self-advocacy, as far as bullying goes, is just really being able to identify what it is that's bothering you, why it's bothering you, and that person that you can go to and speak to about it.
Wow, very well said. A lot of us, we don't have that courage to do that.
I know. I that's part of the reason why it's so important to me, because as a child, when I was being bullied, when I couldn't read, I had dyslexia and I was struggling, and it was embarrassing and it was hard. I didn't go to my mom and I didn't tell her, because she was that person who kept pushing me and pushing me and pushing me. And I didn't really have anyone in my school that I felt that, or maybe I did and I just didn't know that I could. I just kept taking it all in and taking it all in and taking it all in. And that is the most horrific feeling as a child, and having experienced that. And I know you experienced it as well, and it brings back a lot of emotions.
Yeah.
But it's not something I want to see our children go through.
Yeah.
So if we can teach them the skills, and teach them that it's okay to say something to somebody, nothing is wrong with you. That has to be the first message, because I always thought that it was because there was something wrong with me. I wasn't smart, or wasn't intelligent, or I wasn't good enough, or I can't read, or what's wrong with me? Am I stupid? Those kind of things. So the bullying actually creates all those emotions and thoughts inside of us, and that leads to, and we see it all too often, depression and suicide and other things. So, or bully side, as they call it. So yeah. So having been there, I would say that that's why self-advocacy is important.
Jennifer was saying that, it's best to teach self-esteem. We've
absolutely
thought that. Thank you, Jennifer, for sharing that thought with us. So just a few more questions, and then we have to answer the questions our audience asking. If there's a child watching, what do you want to say to them?
Okay, I would just say it's just really important that you commit yourself to acceptance and starting down a path of understanding. So just know that other children who are around you, just because they look different doesn't mean that they're really, really, truly different than you. We all have hearts, we all have feelings, we all come from the same kind of, we have families, and even though our families might be different, they might look different, we're still humans, and we still come from that place. And that just understanding and knowing those things are important. So just, be willing to just listen, really listen to someone else who might be different than you. You would be surprised at how much you might actually have in common with someone else.
Yeah. Actually, I do the study of the Bible and the Quran. It's on a pause right now. And the more I'm reading, sometimes the Bible in my hand, and I forget that it's the Bible. I think it's the Quran, and I'm like, oh, wait, this is not the Quran. This is the Bible, because of the similarity we have.
Right. So yeah, there's a lot of people who don't understand that. Like, if you pick up the Quran and you pick up the Old Testament, like, Job and Jonah and Jesus or Isa, you could go on, Adam, just all the prophets, Samuel, like, they're all there. And the stories are there. But a lot of people don't know that because they've never been exposed to that. Yeah. So they have those biases as well.
Yeah.
They think that you don't really believe in God, you believe in Allah, or something like that. So
yeah, they do ask, do you believe, you really believe in Jesus? Do you believe in Mary? I say, yeah, we also believe in the virgin birth.
Right.
So,
yeah, people will be very surprised.
Yeah. It just takes us to be able to help others learn about ourselves.
Yeah, to have conversation.
Yeah, like what you said, you do your best, and the rest, it'll take place. And before you leave, please tell us, what plans you have for yourself. I know you said you want to become a public speaker, and also tell us where you could be reached if there's anyone out there who would like you to speak at their event. or anywhere.
Okay, so for right now, like I just have my Facebook page, so you're welcome to message me, send me a message, and put what it is exactly you would like to talk about, and then we can exchange phone numbers or emails. Um, I am open to that. So what do I want to do with myself? That's a really good question. So I love teaching, and I can't see ever really truly being away from it 100%. And special education is my passion. So I do want to branch out more into public speaking and do more of the workshops that I used to do. So I really do want I want to do some parent workshops on self-advocacy and the importance of teaching a child with disabilities how to self-advocate. I especially for children who are getting ready to go into college, because you may have services in high school. Those services do not follow you into colleges and universities, although colleges and universities do have offices of disabilities. The laws are different, the supports are different, and it's really important that a child with a disability understand what those supports are that are available and what is not available, because the law is so different. I also want to do workshops on dyslexia, particularly and reading difficulties. Of course, I'm going to do more research into that before I do those workshops, because we're learning a lot right now about dyslexia. It's a lot of research coming out about new techniques and things that they found that are really working to push kids who have dyslexia. So I'd like to do that, and other special education, parent engagement types of things, and self-esteem type workshops.
Wow. May you be blessed on your path. There, we need many of you. There's a lot of people are suffering, and you could help us a lot. So now we're going to go to the question. I want to tell everyone, thank you for tuning in. I think I haven't said it. There's a lot of people who said hi. I'm not going to mention all of you, but thank you for tuning in, and hi. So now we're going to the question. Jennifer Osgar asked, sometimes I wonder which is better, the way we do things now with dixing so much, or is it too much? Do you mean mixing, or dixing is a word? D-X-I-N-G.
I'm not sure what.
Help us. I know you're on. What do you mean by that question? Maybe she means mixing.
Mixing.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's just really important to just understand and accept others for their. I mean, you don't have to say like you agree completely with their choices or their differences, but just to understand where they're coming from, and just to value them as a human being.
She also says, I have a friend who says, I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be accepted.
Oh, right.
Oh, okay, sorry.
Okay. She also I'm sorry, what were you reading? She wants to be what?
To say her question again, the one we misunderstood. So sometimes I wonder what is better, the way we do things now with diagnosing so much, or is it too much?
Yeah, so that's one of those issues where I think that we've always had the same amount of individuals who had disabilities. With some diagnosing, I feel that it is too much, like the ADHD type of diagnosing. If a kid's hyper, we automatically want to stamp ADHD on them, like they have a disability. They can't sit still. I think, how did teachers teach those kids years ago? So, but there is a lot of research out there that helps with supporting them. So diagnosing is important, especially with some specific students, because then we know what does the research say? What is the best practices that we can use to support them? So I know for me, as a dyslexic, there's a lot of tools that I had to be taught to use. And if I had not been diagnosed as dyslexic, I don't think anyone would have thought to teach me those executive functioning type skills, like, okay, you really should use a planner, go back and check this, use your alarm for this. There's a lot of different tools that I use on a regular basis that helps me to be successful and has allowed me to get the education level that I have been able to achieve, that I think without learning those would not have happened. And had not I been diagnosed, then I would say that probably would not have happened.
Thank you for answering that. For that, she also says, I have a friend who says, I don't want to be tolerated. I want to be appreciated. That stuck with me.
Yeah. So, right. So, I mean, the word tolerance is kind of, it's one of those cliche words. It's like, well, I have to tolerate you because you're not the same as me. But it is also, like I was saying earlier, the research says that it's a form of communication. So if we're going to be communicating to others, we want to communicate that we do accept them. And so in order to communicate acceptance, you have to first have tolerance. So they kind of go hand in hand. Like, you can't accept someone if you're not going to say, okay, I realize that you're different from me, but I value you as a human being, and therefore I accept you. So it kind of all goes together. So I understand that word is a cliche.
I think the first step is to having that tolerance, and then slowly the appreciation will build. And that's upon us. We need to work hard on. If we want people to understand
Absolutely.
that, self-advocacy, we need to go out there, educate people, whether it's a learning disability, whether it's about your faith, your race, your culture, whatever it is. We need to go out there, get out of our comfort zone, and educate people. We can't always point the finger and blame people. If we want people to appreciate us and respect us for who we are, we need to step up to the plate and be out there and make our voice heard.
I agree.
Yeah. So now there's another question. I'm not going to pronounce your name. I don't want to mispronounce it. Any tips on teaching kindergartens how to defend themselves against bullies? I sometimes go tell the teacher, don't cut it. Teachers are busy or too far away because bullying happened in the hallway or during recess.
Yeah, that's the hard part. So so part of defending yourself, I would say, is the self-advocacy piece. So you really have to teach them. And I'm sure that there's someone in that building, hopefully, that they feel safe with, whether that be an administrator or a teacher or even a teacher's assistant, some adult that they can say, this is what happened, and it's really bothered me. Or every day when I go to the water fountain, this happens. Or when I'm going to the lunchroom, this happens. Because a lot of times, students will find that one spot, that sweet spot in the school where there's either not a camera or there's usually not a teacher. And that will be the area that they focus in on, because they know, hey, I did it here before, I got away with it, so I'm going to do it again. So, yeah, so I would just say that self-advocacy piece is really big, especially in that, because yes, you can go to the school and you can say something, but it's really, a lot of times administrators will tell you, well, it's your word against theirs. Like, they're saying they didn't do that didn't happen. So it becomes one of those he said, she said things. So I would say right away, report it right away. And then, hopefully something good will come out of it.
Being a teacher, if you don't mind me adding this, to being
a
kindergarten teacher for 3 years, there's some things that, like you mentioned, teachers are too busy. Sometimes you as a parent could volunteer and talk with the teacher. Maybe I could get a book on bullying and emotions, or different books that would promote goodness and understanding, and talk with the teacher if you could come in and do a book reading or a puppet show or some coloring pages to help the kids get, because they're still young, they get bullied. When bullying, we shouldn't be introducing so early at a young age, because they get mixed up. They think everything becomes bullying. Even, I can't touch, to them is considered bullying now, because they're trying to understand. So the best thing, the golden rule, promoting the golden rule in that classroom. And as parents, we need to go there and try to implement it into the classrooms, or even as a whole school-wide assembly, try to do some kind of event. And yes, I mean, the school could do so much about bullying, where funds are cut down, teachers are overloaded with work. It's hard. It's not easy. So, parents, we should do our part and support the school and help the school and the children deal with these bullying issues. Let me see if there's anything else. Bullying begins at home. Reporting channels. Reporting channels is support for students to access. However, parents accountable as well. I don't know if you can see the question. Maybe you'll get it better. LJ Roberts, bullying begins at home. Specifying reporting channels and support for the students to access. However, it holds parents accountable as well.
Okay. So specify reporting channels and support for students to access. So that's basically like a lot of schools have programs for anti-bullying programs. I know the school that I'm at now does, where children can feel safe speaking with other children or with adults. There's usually, of course, there's an adult present, but so there's usually a school usually has some type of system that they want it reported, like in writing, or speak to an administrator, or a specific way that they want it done. So that would be the channels that she's talking about. And what she's saying is it's important that parents are held accountable too, because and I see that, I've seen that before. Sometimes parents will think that a child is just overreacting to something that's happening at school, or be dismissive of it. And then also with cyberbullying, if you don't know what your child is doing online, you can't prevent that. So I think it's really, I'm not saying that it's for us to read every single thing that they do. Like, I'm not going to say that. We're parents. You have to parent in your own way. But if you don't know what your child is doing, you can't help them.
Sure.
So, and if you haven't built a relationship to where they feel they can tell you what's happening. And then sometimes they can't tell you because it might be a mistake that they've made that they are ashamed of, and they don't want to tell you that they've done that. And then they're being bullied about it, and it becomes a cyberbully issue. And then it's blown up into this really big, huge situation. And they really don't want to go to you about it because you'll be ashamed. They feel you'll be ashamed of them, or that you'll somehow be unhappy with them. And so they don't want to come to you. So I think like having our children to understand that we all make mistakes, and I hope that you don't make a really big mistake. But if you do, I hope that you feel that you can be open and honest about it.
Thank you. If I may add to that, since being a teacher and a parent, I see both sides of the spectrum. Yet I've seen many parents who are so dedicated with their children. They're doing so much, so involved. But, after a certain age, the parents really don't have much control over their child, or they can't manage their child anymore. Now the environment takes over, the peer pressure, the people around them, where they're living, that takes overpowers the kid. And especially they're going through the puberty, the changes. So it becomes very hard for the child to behave sometimes. And, I don't think in that case is where we should always blame the parents. The parents do their best. But then, there's parents who are neglectful. And this is one thing I'm planning to put in my new book, which I just begun. It's a more of a chapter book. So, one of the things is we shouldn't brush everything with the same brush, thinking child bullies, it's all parents. There's parents who do care and are trying their best. But then there's the neglectful parents, or there's parents who just don't know how. They want to, but they don't have the tools or the resource on how to bring that change, or help their child. So going up the page, while our culture originates, drive us, people are people. We must learn to speak with our hearts and mind, and with uttermost respect. Yes.
Agreed.
Yeah. How do we teach our children to open up and be transparent with children?
So that's a more difficult thing for children. Children don't always want other children to know everything there is to know about them, because then they feel that they're going to be judged, and that you know, even in our religion, or I don't want to go too deep into religion, but you know, when we have certain beliefs, you know, kids are afraid that to let other kids know that they're of a certain faith because they feel they'll be judged. They start to use, you know, more Americanized names, like you know, people with the name you know, Muhammad might go by Mo or Mike, um, rather than go by their actual name. So it's really difficult to teach children to open up and be transparent with other children, because that's when they really like the self-protection mode kind of kicks in, and they feel like the reason they do some of the things that they do is because they feel they need to protect themselves, for whatever reason that is. So I don't really have a really good solid answer for that question, because that's something I'm still exploring myself. But I think it is something important that we should explore further. Yeah, I think just letting them know that it's, you know, I guess the one thing that I would say is teaching them to be self-confident, to be proud of themselves for who they are, what they believe in, and to be proud of that, and to understand that it's okay, you know, to be different from this person or that person, or to have a different faith and believe differently. And that's a start to being more transparent. But to actual transparency, I don't think that even as adults, we're actually transparent with others. Like we're not really transparent with everyone in our lives, with coworkers and other adults in our lives. So I think that's a real difficult nut to crack. But hopefully, just by starting for them to build self-confidence and to just be, you know, aware that it's okay to be different, that'll come in time.
Yeah, very well said. My last speaker, I had Tamika Anderson. She spoke about confidence. If you want to go to that talk, it's on my page, and she'll help you, Dee Webster, with that. Also, I did a talk at ICNA, which I uploaded today on my page, Kolmeki Sale, where I talk about mastering the art of the golden rule against school bullying. So that's a time process. You know, it takes time. You know, some of the bullying suggestions are temporary. They will help you at the moment, but we need a long-term solution. So that's what I came up with that. So thank you, Sister Martina. You did an amazing job. I really appreciate it, because I know you're so busy. You're doing so much work right now, and you took the time to talk to us and educate us. And thank you, everyone, for watching. Before we leave, I have to announce the next talk show. And this talk show, you know, it's very, very important to me. And so our next talk show will have Wendy Lenski on Wednesday, April 25th at 9 p.m. I had to change the time from 7 to 9. If I'm speaking in my pajamas, do forgive me. So it'll be at 9 p.m. Now, the reason I really want this talk is very important to our time, for what's going on, the wars and the hatred, all these things that are going on, because you'll be amazed who she is. Wendy is a 9/11 survivor. She's an anti-hate activist, and she will speak about surviving tragedy and then focus on how to use it to help others build their resiliency skills and continue living. This is one topic I do not want anyone to miss, especially myself, using tragedy to promote goodness. So please join us next week at 9 p.m. I know it's a little bit late, but I had to adjust to her time to make sure she comes and talks with us. So until next time, please do share this talk and join me next week. Thank you, everyone, for watching. Thank you, Martina, for joining us and giving us.
Thank you for having me.
It's such an amazing talk. You're welcome. Bye.
Bye-bye.